What's up, Texas basketball fam? I'm Keenan. He's Ari. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let's get it.
Simple enough.
So
let's fix the Texas basketball program, shall we?
Yeah, I was gonna say Texas hasn't won since we talked last. 0-2. That puts them at 3-3 in conference. So let's start with Iowa State. They gave up 79 points, which was the second most they've given up this year, other than Gonzaga. Carr was 4 for 14. He had a rough first half, really. He kind of picked it up in the second half, but he had a really rough first half. I had some questions about the lineup decisions, to be honest with you. So Tristan LaCombe was playing late in the second half, which I get the message. You know, this is a guy who plays really hard, who's fought through his career, and he's an inspirational story, but he can't score. And to handicap yourself on offense is really kind of a strange decision, in my opinion. I don't know. What did you think about that?
Yeah. You know, you're trying to weigh the importance of winning games with the balance of figuring out your rotations. And so, I mean, this is sort of that exploratory period of time of college basketball where coaches are trying to fiddle with things and figure out the right combinations and lineups. And I mean, you're right in terms of like, why would he factor into that, right? Like, he's probably not a guy that you're going to be getting deep minutes with, but maybe it was just a level of frustration from Chris Beard's perspective to say like, all right, I'm sick of these guards not figuring things out. Let's get some fresh guys in there that are doing the right thing. So, you know, I don't know exactly the motivation behind that from Chris Beard's perspective, but I do know that you are at this point in time in the college basketball season, just trying to figure things out in terms of what you have and, you know, what your rotations are going to look like. We're going to get over the next month. Those rotations are going to shorten. And so we're going to have a better idea of what these lineups are going to look like. But at this point now, it's just exploring and figuring out what the best lineups are.
I see what you're saying, and I agree to an extent, but I think it's too late to be trying this kind of stuff in the season because they're 3-3 in conference now, and the first half of the conference slate is what they needed to like run through in order to compete in this conference, and they're 3-3, and they really only have one key win against Oklahoma, which is actually now a quad one win. So interesting fact.
How many quad one wins does Texas have?
Who knows?
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's the only one they have. So Iowa State.
And look, and you're right. Even insofar as like, but is LaCombe going to even be in the, you know, like that doesn't even seem like a guy that should be involved in the rotation. So I'm a firm believer in like the first 10 games of conference play are kind of a feel out period. And then you figure out who your legit contenders are. But to have 3 losses at this point, and they've lost 2 of their last 3, and they've lost some games here that maybe they shouldn't have lost. This team is an utter disappointment right now.
Yeah, no doubt. This is not what people were expecting. Not really what I was expecting. I didn't know if they were going to be a Final Four team, but I definitely thought they would be a top 25 team, which they're not right now.
I thought Kansas, Baylor, Texas, top tier of the conference.
Yep.
Now it's not how it Kansas, is. Baylor, Tech.
Yeah, it is. Tech is really good. That's going to be a rough game going to Lubbock on February 1st.
The last few weeks I've been like, they got to figure this thing out on offense because Tech is going to put them in a straitjacket, and it is going to be ugly.
Yeah, they kind of, I mean, Mark Adams, similar to Chris Beard, they just seem like a more athletic version of Texas to me. That's what they feel like.
Which is crazy. What the hell's happened here? How did this happen?
I don't know.
Is there any history there between Tech and Texas and Chris Beard and Mark Adams? Any?
Yeah, a little bit, just a little bit there. But I mean, those Tech players and those fans are going to be like amped for that game. I mean,
and especially how things have gone, you know, where it's like the expectation going to the season was Texas is here and Tech is here, and now it's flipped. And so, it's going to be, it could be ugly, both like ugly on the court and ugly off the court.
Yeah. I'm going to the game. So
are you
driving out to Lubbock? Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a good reason to not wear fan gear to games because Rivals doesn't allow you to do that anyway. But I would not have done that regardless because it's going to be chaos. But real quick on Iowa State. So Gabe Kalsher went 6 for 12 from 3 by himself and scored 22 points. And Texas turned the ball over 20 times. You can't win a game like that. You can't win a game with 20 turnovers and giving up 79 points to the other team.
Well, and I mean, Iowa State's not a prolific offensive attack. I mean,
Nope.
This is a team that wins on defense. I mean, this is a lot of what we've seen in the Big 12 to start. Like really good defensive teams. I don't know if you've looked at this recently, but like I remember at one point there were 6 teams, I think, in the top 40 of Ken Palm defense.
Yeah, it's something like that.
So, I mean, you have, I'd say right now, Kansas is the best offense in the Big 12, but not even top 5 defense at this point. And that's why, like, I'd love to say that Kansas is a legit title contender, but they've got their defense has to be better. I don't know if it can be because they just don't have the rim protection.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
But then you have, West Virginia Tech, Iowa State, even Baylor. Baylor is better offensively than those other teams, but like those other teams are struggling offensively. And so you just have really, what you have here is a accumulation of teams that are really good defensively that, if they can get enough on offense in a given night, they're going to win. And I mean, Texas, as we've talked about kind of throughout the year, has been really good defensively. But the guard play just continues to be maddening. And you're going to get to the Saturday game here. But the Saturday game was the Marcus Carr 25-point game, right? That was Saturday?
Yep.
No, that was Tuesday.
No, Tuesday. That was Tuesday.
Saturday was Iowa State. So you're going to get to the Tuesday game.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, I don't want to, I wanted you to finish out with Iowa State, but that it's almost as if we saw like the word, it was like the bottom of the barrel. Like it's as bad as it could get in that Iowa State game. And then maybe there's some light here now in terms of the guard play after the Tuesday loss. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that Carr was awesome, but the other 2 starting guards were not great. So they need to get it so all 3 of those guys are good at the same time. And that just hasn't been happening. Usually one of them goes off and the other 2 struggle.
Right. And the turnovers are the killer. I mean, missing shots is one thing, but 20 turnovers, you just can't have that.
You can't win a game like that, especially on the road in the Big 12.
And especially against a team like Iowa State that struggles to score in the half court.
Right. So really quick to finish out Iowa State before we move on to Kansas State. Something I've noticed about these teams that annoys me is how quickly they switch players out early in the game. Like the starting 5 is together for 2 minutes and then they switch out the guards. Or I think it's hard to get cohesion with your teammates when you're playing in 2-3 minute spurts at a time before somebody else comes in. I don't know. I'm not a coach, so I'm sure he knows what he's doing more than I do, but it just seems like it's really hard to get in any kind of rhythm when you have different guys on the floor every time.
No, I completely agree. And we talk a lot about starters and obviously the actual minutes matter more than anything else, but you're right. I mean, you're getting to the point as we kind of started off this conversation with like shortening those getting to the point of starting to shorten those rotations and, having more familiarity. Probably a big part of this problem with Texas, I'd imagine, is a lack of familiarity, a lot of new players, new coach. So, it's like, all right, let's get this rolling in terms of familiarity with one another.
Yeah. And another problem with the lineups is, I don't like calling out individual players because they're amateurs, but Askew and Cunningham should not be on the floor at the same time. I don't think. I think that's 3-on-5 on offense because I like their effort. I really do. And Askew's a good defender and, Brock's a decent defender too, but neither of those guys can score really. And having them both on the floor at the same time just means you're not going to be scoring very much.
And I'm trying to think who handles the ball when those 2 guys on the floor together.
Askew usually.
Yeah. I'd like one of those to be paired with one of the Courtney, Ramey, Andrew Jones, Marcus Carr group.
Right. You would think, but it's been weird, man. It's been weird. And that leads me to my next point, which is about Kansas State. So Kansas State dominated Texas in the paint. They outscored them 28-16. And meanwhile, Dessou and Mitchell combined for 18 minutes in that game. That doesn't make any sense to me, especially with Dessou, man. I mean, Mitchell has kind of been hot and cold, but Dessou's been consistent when he's on the floor. I think he should be getting 20 minutes a game.
Why do you think it was that those guys saw such limited minutes in that game?
I don't know. I mean, probably like effort or something. That seems to be like, so like, I don't think they're not giving effort, but like, I really don't know. I really don't know what the issue was. I don't know why they're not playing more.
Well, and Mitchell seems like, he was such a great player for this team to start the season. And it's like, now they've gotten in conference play, he's become kind of an afterthought,
Yeah.
It's really bizarre. He should get back to being sort of a focal point of this offensive attack.
Yeah, and Bishop's been playing a lot, which I like Bishop. I think he's a good addition, but I've been saying this all year. They need to be running 3 forwards. They need to be running Timmy, and then Bishop or Dessou and Mitchell, and then 2 guards, Carr and Jones, I would think at this point. But you don't see that lineup almost ever.
So the K-State game, so I think a lot of people are disappointed in that because, number one, Texas has lost, 3 of 4?
Yeah.
And then you lose to a team at home you shouldn't be losing to. Is that loss, does it change a little bit because Kansas State, then won a second game in a row? And so now it's like, okay, maybe they're a little better than we thought. And then the other part to this too is Carr finally exploded, had 25 points. You mentioned, they need to get a couple of these guys to play, well, at the same time. And I agree with that. But like at the very least, we saw a guy that we've been expecting to play at a high level start to do what we expected him to do.
I agree with you, but he's had games like that in the past, not quite that good, but then he'll come out and go 1 for 6 for 5 points. Like there's just no consistency of the guard play. And it's super frustrating because there's clearly a ton of talent in the guards, but like they just never play together.
Have you been watching Marquette at all? Marquette beat Villanova.
I saw that they beat Villanova last night, which I think Villanova is overrated, but like Texas doesn't have a win like that.
Right. And look, I don't think there's any question Chris Beard's the coach you'd rather have than Shaka Smart, but
sure.
I understand why a lot of Texas fans are like, what's different about this team? And look, it's a process. It does take time. I just think, like, as we even talked about, was it last week's video or 2 weeks ago? Or was like, I still think this team could win the Big 12 championship because they're so talented. And now it's like 3 losses. It'll be tough. Already, they're not gonna go undefeated the rest of conference play. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think expectations have diminished this year. And you certainly start to wonder, why is this team as bad as it is with the talent that they have?
Yeah, and I have some concerns in general as well about these lineups starting to get guys disgruntled, right? Like they had the Jalen Tyson transfer. I'm not saying anybody's going to transfer. That's not what I mean. But like, again, Mitchell and Dessou combining for 18 minutes in a game where they're getting killed in the paint. Like they're making these sacrifices and it could just be a source of frustration.
Yeah, that one is really hard to understand. Is there any, like, what's the silver lining here? Is there one?
The silver lining of Kansas State was Carr.
Or just of where, like, big picture here, this basketball team.
This season?
Yeah.
Man, I'm not trying to be negative. I don't, they need to improve on a lot of things. And like, I think 3-point shooting is like their Achilles heel.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really improve that much. Like that's kind of like you got what you got at this point, and they're 197th in the country in 3-point percentage.
You're right. They played how many games? I mean, you kind of at this point,
you know what you got.
They're not suddenly going to become a prolific 3-point shooting team.
Yeah, they're not. Which is frustrating because that's how you win games in the Big 12 on the road. Is you win the turnover battle, and you outshoot them from three. And they're not going to do that, especially when you have 20 turnovers. You're not going to win the turnover battle. And Kansas State had less turnovers than or fewer turnovers than Texas did as well. I mean, it was only 11-10, but Texas needs to be winning that margin by like 5 every game to win, I think.
So Texas has Oklahoma State on Saturday.
Yeah, I have some notes about that if you want to get into that.
Yeah.
So as you probably remember, OSU worked Texas in their last matchup. Texas scored 51 points the entire game. They shot 39% from the field and 27% from three, and got to the line a total of 7 times. So I think the key is going to be getting to the line, because they have to manufacture points in some way if they can't hit threes. Like, they have to get to the line. They have to make it like a priority to get fouled early in the game, get into the bonus early in the first half, early in the second half.
Well, and Texas seems to be the team that like teams get right off of, at least Oklahoma State and Kansas State. Oklahoma State was struggling big time, then played Texas, and since then they beat Baylor, they beat TCU in a game. Oklahoma State was down 56-50, I believe.
To Baylor?
No, to TCU last night.
Last night. I thought you were talking about the Okie State Baylor game.
Right. So I think they outscored them like 7-6-0 down the stretch to win the game.
Yeah.
Rondell Walker hit a 3 and then 2 free throws to basically win the game for him. And this is a guy that, you know, we hadn't seen much of from this year that has played really well in that game. Kansas State was struggling, played Texas, beat them, and now they've won 2 straight. So Texas is the get right team, I guess.
Yeah, that's not what you want to be. That's not the reputation you want. The Big 12 is, oh, you're struggling, just play Texas and then you'll get back on track.
You'll get right.
Right. And, you know, again, with Oklahoma State, you said this a couple of times, but their motivation isn't the postseason. What their motivation is ruining other teams' seasons. Right. And they could really, really hamper Texas' season if they beat them on Saturday.
You can't get swept by this Oklahoma State team.
You can't.
That would be a disaster. I mean, as bad as this season's gone relative to expectations, it gets worse if they lose on Saturday.
I mean, if they lose on Saturday, that they could go, how many games do you play in conference? 18?
18.
They could go like 7-11. And that they might miss the tournament at that point. Like, literally.
Oklahoma State's a team that, like, when you looked in the schedule, you're like, that's 2 wins.
W.
Right. You've already lost. If you're Texas, like, think about Baylor, Kansas. These are teams you haven't played yet. So, you know, you still have 4 games against those 2 teams. You figured 2 wins against Oklahoma State, 2 wins against Kansas State, TCU. Like, these are the games you figured you were going to win. And now you've lost a lot of these. Like, the schedule is going to get so much tougher. We've kind of talked about that.
Yeah. For
them to be 3-3 at this point, not good considering their schedule and who they played and what they have coming up down the stretch of the season.
No, they have 5 straight ranked games from January 29th to February 12th, I believe.
And that's what they've got.
5 straight ranked teams.
And they've got Oklahoma State and TCU and then Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee's with the start of the ranked games. If they're still ranked, I don't know. But that's going to be a really hard game too, because they play similar to Texas, Rick Barnes, you know?
Right. Yeah, I mean.
But they have Kennedy Chandler.
Yeah.
No, and Vescovo.
And Tennessee's a really good defensive team.
Yep.
Again, as you'd expect, because Rick Barnes. And then I think is the Tech game after that?
Tech game is February 1st. So yeah. That's a tough 2 games.
A lot of history there in those 2 games too. Pretty incredible that it worked out like that. I'd say Texas has to sweep these next 2 games.
Oh, for sure.
Should.
No question. They need to, at TCU and Oklahoma State at home. I'm going to Fort Worth on Monday for the game, or it's Tuesday night, but I'm going on Monday. We'll see. I mean, TCU's no joke, man. Mike Miles is an all Big 12 type of player. He's a star, that guy, that shooting guard for TCU, averaging, I think, 19 points a game. So Every team in this conference has somebody like that, it seems like, except for Texas.
We thought it was Trey Mitchell, but where has he been?
Not playing
Right.
enough.
We thought it was Timmy Allen, and
he's been consistent, but yeah, they don't have a guy that can consistently score 18 points.
It's got to change.
Quite a depressing episode of Keep Austin Beard.
At least Texas had a good football season. Whoops.
Oh yeah, it's been rough. So anyway,
the Moody Center opening up next year. That'll be fun.
I actually do like next year's team more than this because I like Morris and I like Dylan Mitchell has been flying up the boards and Rivals and ESPN, all those sites. Dylan Mitchell is flying up those sites. So he's going to be a star and he's all in, signed. So I like what he's going to bring. He's the exact type of player that they need right now. Just like a freakish athlete who's high on energy and can catch lobs. Like they need a lob threat and they don't have that at all. And that's what he is. Well,
and I mean, Westlake is starting to churn out some really good players. Unfortunately, Matthew Mayer is at Baylor and KJ Adams is at Kansas. So I think that's a huge part to what Chris Beard has to do too, is keep the Texas kids. I mean, it's amazing to think about the talent of basketball in this state, considering the lack of care for it. But where I live in Dallas, Lake Highlands and Richardson played a fantastic high school basketball game the other night.
K-Son went for 49.
I mean, John Calipari was there. So Duncanville, obviously known for football, but they've got a great basketball program too. Man, there's some really good basketball talent in the state, and a lot of them are leaving the state. So I think that's a huge part to what Beard has to do sort of moving forward for this program.
Yeah, and I think in order to do that, he has to win more.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, Baylor's killing it, but they won the national title last year. So it's like,
expected.
Get better and you get better talent. The rich get richer in college sports. It's just how it works.
And look, the silver lining that I have is Baylor was dominant and then they lost 2 straight and they look beatable. Kansas, they've pulled some wins here that probably they shouldn't have. I mean, they beat Iowa State, probably shouldn't have won that game at home. Got a 3 by Christian Brown in a tie ball game for their, I'm watching so much basketball. I cannot remember who's playing who. Like,
I know.
Like, who'd Kansas beat on Tuesday? It was on the road. Was it?
Because all the teams are like competitive. So it's not like, oh, they played whoever and beat them up. It's like, no. Every team is competitive in this entire conference. It's crazy. And I'm watching so much damn basketball that like I honestly like it's all I have to literally look at the schedules to know. Like we had we had John Shambi on this morning on Big 12 radio, and nice.
He's great. And I was like, well, what game did you call? I remember watching a game you called with Fred. I don't remember what the game was. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, dude, it's basketball overload. I feel the same way, and I'm watching other conferences too. I'm watching SEC ball. I'm watching Big Ten ball, and it's a fun year. I mean, it's disappointing where Texas is, but this is going to be a really fun tournament because it seems pretty wide open.
Right, and that again, that's the silver lining here is there's no. This is a conference that's going to beat each other up, and so I mean, the disappointment here is that Texas should be, based on their schedule early season, should be close to first place. So to be 500 at this point, when the back end, it's going to be so tough. Like that's the disappointment. But the silver lining is nobody's running away with the conference. There's going to be some losses. Baylor already has 2 losses in conference. Kansas has 1, but like this conference is just going to beat itself up. And so, Texas just has to get it figured out. But obviously at this point, we've kind of been talking about the same thing for weeks. So.
All right. Thank you, Ari. I appreciate you, brother. This will do it for Keep Austin Beard this week. Don't forget to do all the stuff you're supposed to do. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. That's it, right?
That's it. Peace.
All right, guys. Thank you.